And in the frosty season is a 22-line excerpt from the Romantic poet William Wordsworth's most famous work, the Prelude, or Growth of a Poet's Mind, an autobiographical poem. There are 3 versions of this epic poem altogether, none of which were published in his lifetime. Its first iteration in 1799 was a relatively short manuscript draft of 800 lines, divided into 2 parts. He substantially revised this text over the next few years until another version was produced in 1805, when it had expanded to 8,000 lines, spread over 13 books. The final version, with the addition of another book, was not published until 1850, after Wordsworth's death. Although this memory of ice skating as a young boy made its first appearance in the 1799 draft, the text here is from Book 1 of the 1805 version, which included a more developed and detailed narrative of Wordsworth's childhood experiences and his reflections on nature and personal growth. Wordsworth was born and raised in the Lake District, a mountainous region in northwest England. After time spent living in Dorset and Somerset and travelling in France and Germany, Wordsworth returned to the Lake District, where he settled with his sister and where he also married his childhood sweetheart. He was to remain there for the rest of his life. The landscape of the Lake District was a major influence on his poetic works. From the age of 8 to the age of 17, Wordsworth attended a grammar school in the village of Hawkshead. The small lake of Esthwaite Water is located just a short distance from here, and so it is widely considered to be the lake Wordsworth was referring to in this extract. Wordsworth was a romantic poet, and this extract captures key themes and characteristics of romanticism, including an emphasis on nature, the use of vivid sensory imagery, an exploration of the formative and deeply meaningful nature of childhood experiences, and a sense of awe and wonder. The Romantics idealized childhood as a time of purity, innocence, and a close connection to nature. This extract describes a moment of youthful joy and freedom, as the speaker recalls skating on the frozen lake with friends. The Romantics also prized individual experience and subjective perception. In reflecting on a personal memory, the whole passage is filled with a sense of nostalgia and introspection. For Wordsworth, nature was not merely a backdrop for human activities, but a profound teacher that offered spiritual and moral lessons. In this passage, the act of skating on the ice isn't just a moment of childhood pleasure. It's a formative experience that contributes to Wordsworth's understanding of the world and of himself. His use of vivid sensory imagery and the personification of nature suggests that these natural experiences are essential for his emotional and spiritual growth. Moreover, the nostalgic tone reflects how these memories, recalled in later years, serve as a bridge to his past, allowing him to reflect on how these early experiences have shaped his adult consciousness. This aligns with Wordsworth's belief in the importance of memory as a vital element in shaping one's perception and understanding of life. The poem comprises one stanza of 22 lines. It is written in blank verse, i.e. it has a bass meter of iambic pentameter, di-dum, 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 e.g., and in the frosty season when the sun. But there is no rhyme scheme. This lack of rhyme, combined with Wordsworth's frequent use of enjambment and caesura, which allows the poem to gracefully ebb and flow, creates a poetic narrative of understated elegance and beauty. Due to the poems having been written in the 19th century, A small number of the words Wordsworth uses may be unfamiliar to the modern student's ear, such as confederate, tumult, and melancholy. What also makes it slightly more challenging to access is the fact that Wordsworth manipulates syntax and word order using anastrophe and fronted adverbials to create a different emphasis, rhythm, or poetic effect. Anastrophe is a technique where the usual word order of a sentence is rearranged. In standard English, for example, we would say, "The cottage windows blazed through the twilight," while Wordsworth instead writes, "The cottage windows through the twilight blazed." Note how the verb is now given prominence by its placement on the end of the poetic line. A fronted adverbial is a word or phrase placed at the beginning of a sentence that provides additional information about the action, often describing how, when, where, or why it happens. If, for example, we look at "clear and loud the village clock tolled 6, we can see that the phrase "clear and loud" is being used as a fronted adverbial to modify the verb told. I'll look in more detail at the specific poetic effects of these examples as we go through the extract line by line. Wordsworth also makes extensive use of vivid imagery, employing similes, e.g. proud and exulting like an untired horse that cares not for his home. Personification, e.g. while the distant hills into the tumult sent an alien sound of melancholy. And language that appeals to the senses, particularly those of sight, e.g. the evocative verb blazed, and of sound, e.g. the onomatopoeic verb hissed. The extract begins, "And in the frosty season, when the sun was set, and visible for many a mile the cottage windows through the twilight blazed." Note the use of the coordinating conjunction "and" here to introduce the episode, indicating that this is an extract taken from a much larger work. In the preceding lines, Wordsworth reflects on his childhood memories and the natural environment, in particular on how the beauty and serenity of nature impacted him during his youth. This episode, with its dynamic and joyful imagery, therefore, provides a stark contrast to the more contemplative tone that has preceded it. Wordsworth immediately evokes a vivid image of both time and place. It is early evening or twilight during the frosty season, or winter time, with a description of cottage windows suggesting a romantic pastoral setting. Note Wordsworth's use of a fronted adverbial as well as anastrophe in these lines. "And visible for many a mile, the cottage windows through the twilight blazed." This does make it slightly more challenging for the reader who isn't familiar with 18th and 19th century texts, so I'll render it in a more modern way, purely to get its sense. The cottage windows, visible for many a mile, blazed through the twilight. Now that we understand the sense of the image, we need to consider the effect that Wordsworth was intending with his different structuring of these lines. The use of a fronted adverbial here, "and visible for many a mile," gives this phrase prominence. The anastrophe, where the usual subject, verb, object order of a sentence is inverted, places the verb blazed on the end of the sentence and likewise gives it prominence. The emphasis on both of these elements highlights how the light from the cottage windows stands out strongly against the dimming evening, enhancing the imagery and emotional impact of the scene. Even though these lights are tacitly commanding him home because it is time for bed, with the verb blazed with its connotations of fire suggesting coziness and warmth, he declares, "I heeded not," i.e. I ignored the summons. Happy time it was indeed for all of us. Note the use of caesura here, which creates a dramatic pause. combined with another incidence of anastrophe. The way in which attention is drawn to the phrase happy time puts the emotion centre stage. The first person plural pronoun us indicates Wordsworth's nostalgia for his childhood friends, although notice that he does set himself slightly apart from them. While it was certainly a happy time for everyone, for me it was a time of rapture, i.e. of euphoria. The poem continues. Clear and loud the village clock tolled 6. Note the use of the verb tolled here, which denotes a slow, solemn and monotonous succession of strokes to describe the sound of the clock striking the hour. This verb is also used to describe how a bell is rung when a person's death is being announced, and there is more than a suggestion that this bell is announcing the end of the young Wordsworth's pleasure and freedom as he is expected to go inside. Once more he employs a fronted adverbial to give prominence to the description of the sound of the clock's bell, which is clear and loud. Not only does this create a vivid image, but it also emphasises the young Wordsworth's defiance, signalled by the caesura, as he breaks away from convention. He knows exactly what the time is, but he has no intention of going in just yet. I wheeled about. Note the suddenness and speed suggested by this verb, and the childish energy and boundless enthusiasm in the simile, proud and exulting like an untired horse that cares not for his home. Wordsworth's comparison of himself here to a spirited, powerful and energetic horse to convey his joyful and carefree attitude is particularly appropriate, as it reflects his deep connection with and appreciation for the natural world. Similar to a horse that is shod with iron horseshoes, the boys are all shod with the steel of their ice skates as we hissed along the polished ice. The onomatopoeic verb hissed, with its aspirated, breathy h sound and its sibilance, vividly evokes the speed with which their skates slice across the shiny surface of the frozen lake. The way in which this is described as polished suggests that a personified nature has deliberately created the optimal environment for the boys in which to play. Once more, Wordsworth refers to the camaraderie and childish ebullience of the episode as using the exhilarating language of the hunt, where packs of barking dogs pursue game such as the hare. They shout and chase after each other. In games confederate, imitative of the chase and woodland pleasures, the resounding horn, the pack loud bellowing and the hunted hare. Note the alliteration of the aspirated, breathy horn and hunted hare, which perhaps evokes the boys panting from their exertions, and the verbs which convey the volume of the boys' shouts, such as resounding and bellowing. Even though it is dark and cold, they're having the time of their lives, revelling in these winter activities, indicated not only by the verb flew, but also by the fact that not a voice was idle. They are so loud, in fact, that with the din, meanwhile, the precipices rang aloud, the leafless trees and every icy crag tinkled like iron. Wordsworth's focus widens as he zooms out from his immediate surroundings and considers the effect that the boys' games are having on the frozen, mountainous landscape of the Lake District. Their shouts reverberate off the precipices or very steep rock faces or cliffs, and the leafless trees and every icy crag tinkled like iron. The verb rang and the simile tinkled like iron, which have connotations of celebration and delicacy, suggest musicality, and hint that the boys' innocent pleasure is in harmony with nature, rather than fighting against it, as the personified landscape seems to join in with their joy. Even so, the distant hills into the tumult sent an alien sound of melancholy not unnoticed. Another word for melancholy is sadness, a feeling which is alien or out of place in this otherwise euphoric time. The fact that this sound comes from the distant hills is perhaps an allusion to the future, which is a far-off place. Nostalgia, or looking back on a joyous and more innocent past that is long gone, is bound to be tinged with a certain amount of wistfulness and sadness. The fact that Wordsworth uses a litotes here, which is a form of understatement using a double negative, i.e. not unnoticed, which is subtly different to noticed, suggests that he may have been only subliminally aware of it at the time. This phrase reflects his romantic interest in the unconscious influence of nature and memory on human experience. It suggests that it was something that was felt rather than fully realised in the moment, with its emotional significance only becoming clearer through the lens of nostalgia and reflection. The extract ends on a contemplation of the changing colour of the sky, as we are reminded that the day is coming to an end. While the stars eastward were sparkling clear, and in the west the orange sky of evening died away. The terminator is the dividing line between the daylight side and the night side of a planetary body such as the Earth. On Earth, this line is not always sharp and can produce a gradient effect, where the sky appears split between light and dark, especially around sunrise or sunset. There's a real sense here that Wordsworth is aware that he is on the cusp of adulthood, with the intensity, exuberance and vibrancy of his youth reflected in the orange sky of evening, while the self-restraint of his adult life to come is reflected in the night sky where the stars eastward were sparkling clear. In conclusion, the extract "and in the frosty season" from Wordsworth's The Prelude is rich in romantic elements. It captures the beauty and power of nature, explores the emotional depth of individual experience, celebrates childhood and innocence, and highlights the deep connection between humanity and the natural world. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments section below, and I'll do my best to answer them. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos on English language topics and exam techniques, and English literature texts.